led to sing worship songs. But now that I know what's being affiliated, who's being affiliated to that church while they create the music, I cannot fund it. It becomes different for me. I now have a choice. I now have a responsibility. Knowing what I know, does it mean that there's other places out there that do music that I don't know their moral background? You bet. I don't know it. But when I do become aware of it, I have that responsibility and choice to make to say what I'm going to align myself with or not. Also, did you know that the music that you select in the church is tracked by organizations like CCLI that pay the publishers and pay the songwriters of that song? And if they're in that same church and affiliated to the church like Hillsong, then the church is benefiting off of those profits. I can't fund their abuse. I can't fund the knowledge and the things that I know what's going on, especially when I know. Controversial. Here we go. And 3, 2. Hey, what's up, everybody? Thanks so much for downloading, uploading Worship Team Training Podcast into your device. If you're watching us by video or listening to any of your podcast streaming services, we say thank you. And we're back with a part 2 or part due version of Hillsong Music, because last week was a blast. At least I'm not sure if all of us felt that way, but it was just because there's so many different opinions going on and different feelings and emotions when it comes to something that's this devastating as it is, because it does affect the church. We do see it. And the question this week is, should we keep singing Hillsong music? Now, I put out a video on this that got thousands of views last week asking the same question. And there were answers all over the place. But there are worship leaders and churches banning Hillsong music. And so while others defend the use of their music, some may not be aware of the problem, and others may not see it as a problem at all. Therefore, we have many that do see it being a problem. And the question is, do we support, this is by, what's her name? Katie Beatty. Caitlin Beatty, I think. She asked a very important question, which I thought was great over Instagram. Do we support a broken system that, and I put mine in here, that betrayed countless people? Do we compromise our church witness? Do we help protect others that may find their music and church practices as spiritually abusive? That's a pretty loaded question.
Can you repeat that question?
Exactly. Do we support a broken system that betrayed countless people? Do we compromise our church witness by singing the music? Do we help protect others that may find their music and church practices as spiritually abusive? Okay. So how do you decide what's right for you and what's right for others? That's huge. Okay, so who wants to go first at this one?
Oh, I do, but I can wait.
I knew it.
Do it.
Is that for real, Tony? Go.
Well,
do
first,
it.
First, I'm going to answer that question. Almost everybody listening to this already supports a broken system by supporting your own church. Because the minute you think your church is not broken in some way or are infected by sin of the leaders, and yours is perfect, then that right there, I think, is possibly sinful to be thinking that way. So we already do. The big difference with Hillsong right now isn't that it's this new thing that's happened in the church and how awful it is. It's that there's a documentary about it, and it's huge, and we're all watching it. So the conversation is focused on Hillsong, but it's no different than thousands of churches throughout thousands of years, frankly. And so our churches are generally a broken system already because they are infected with our sin. And that's really just the way it is. I have like my bullet points of this on this topic because I've been having this discussion, and I saw the video you posted, I think maybe just yesterday. And here's what I would say, because Brandon, I'm just gonna, if you don't mind me saying, like your video said that you've chosen to no longer use those songs, and I don't ever have a problem with anybody choosing their path. If they're following God and they're choosing their path, it doesn't matter to me if it lines up with me. We're all trying to fish in the sea, trying to find our current. So I don't. This isn't meant as an argument to you, but sure. I do have some questions I would pose to you in that. And the first would be like, are you, Brandon? Are you 100% sure that the money that is earned by that music goes into some general fund that could have been used for negative purposes? Like, do you know the money trail for Hillsong publishing and sales, that you can be sure that money was, that you'd sang the song on Sunday and your few cents were sent into CCLI and then they use that money for hush payments? Can you be sure of the money trail in that way? Or maybe the music department, maybe that money stays funneled in the music department. Maybe there's different entities. I know nothing about Hillsong's business and financial structure. Yes, money was used for negative purposes. I don't know where that money came from specifically. I do think it might benefit Hillsong if perhaps they are on the positive side of this, to be able to show, here's where the money from our royalties come from, or from our sales. It'd be great if they were able to show that. We also need to remember that Brian and a lot of these leaders, Hillsong has taken steps. Brian Houston is gone now. The Carl Lentz is gone. Like, they've taken appropriate steps. That doesn't mean there's not a history there, and that doesn't mean that there isn't still stuff going on we don't know about, and we'll have to wait for the next documentary. This question is a big one for me. Like, how would you accept it if people stopped using your songs or letting you sing or use your gifts, your creative gifts, because of the sins of your pastor? If they were to cancel you out because of the sins of your church leadership, because we have to remember most of these songwriters and singers, and yes, like in the documentary, there is some negative stuff happening in the music department. But once you get anything that gets to this worldwide level in concerts, and I'm not making excuses, but there's a story of the drummer and how he got, kept out of doing a tour and all that. It becomes business. That's a whole different issue. There's a business involved that, unfortunately, there's, again, human nature is going to play a role in there. But many of these songwriters and singers and musicians are there to pursue God and using their gifts to pursue God. And this is their living. So even though some of the money goes to Hillsong or to their publishing or whatever, some of that money also goes to the songwriters. And that's a big deal, to cancel their living because of something that they had no control over. So those are kind of my bullet points. Those are all issues for me. I will tell you personally that I don't have a problem using Hillsong songs. I'm more concerned, is the theology right? Is it a good song? Like, if the theology is right, if the words are right, then to me, it doesn't affect a worship experience to know that its origin was tied to something, nefarious or whatever in that way. I don't know the history of every song we perform, and so those are just my thoughts.
Sure. Well, thanks for your thoughts and the questions. Simply, no, I don't know exactly 100% where the money goes either, but because that's suspect, and because I don't know where it's going, I'm making the personal choice not to fund it because it is already suspect. And Hillsong, you're right, to your point, is not the first nor will be the last church to be involved in any kind of scandal. You're right. At the opening, you said all churches are broken. That's true. But in the video, I made a personal statement of what I personally cannot identify with based upon my background, what I've been through, both being not only a sexual abuse survivor, but also a spiritual abuse survivor. So from those standpoints, I made the determination what I will not do, but not saying that others should do the same, because everybody has their own choice and everybody sees they see different sides of the conversation, which is fine. But in good standing, I cannot support something that I know compromises what not only I believe, also what I've experienced, and should others derive money, derive an income from Hillsongs, like you're saying, like that's in the band, that's their personal choice. And you're right, they're not held responsible if they're caught up in something that was out of their control. Absolutely. I don't believe in people should be held unjustly accountable, but for those who are justly responsible should be held accountable. And if that means, like, for instance, in my work industry right now, you would get banned, you would get barred completely from the industry if you did something like this. You would have to seek another job, another employment in a different sector. That's hands down. As a church, we don't have those kind of regulations. It's very gray. And that's the problem that I find with many churches that operate in that area, because there's no regulation, because it is gray. Not all of them, but many do feel that they can do what they want. Speaking from my own personal experience. So,
and that's powerful. And I wouldn't try to convince you otherwise.
Sure. No. And I don't hear you doing that either. I hear that you're asking a valid question, because those are some of the questions that were asked of me, which I've had to just state the same reasons and answers.
I think that there's concepts to abide by, and that there are standards, as our Christian belief tells us. I'm not shy about sharing a past that's pretty close to yours, Brandon, in being an abuse survivor, both, in church and in regular life. And so I'm just going to go conceptually, because there might be a middle ground or just something for us to consider. First of all, you can use a hymn to abuse people. Mm-hmm. You can take anything. A hymn, and it's how the tool is used. So my biggest, I guess, spotlight would be on looking at how we are using or utilizing the many wonderful things that God allows us to use. If you got a hammer, you can build something, or you can beat somebody with it. It's all in the intent, and it's all in where that's going. And I go back to what I've said in the past, in that the checks and balances come far before a song is written, far before you even get a building to stand, somebody's, shiny behind up there to say something. Okay. The truth of the matter is what are the checks and balances that come before that? Are we checking in with the money, sex, power? Those are our three motivations. And Tony is correct in the sense that we don't know what the checks and balances are. We know that God knows, but all of those safety measures are to really be put in place beforehand. I don't hardly boycott anything. I really don't. I just like, okay, you do you, boo, whatever's going on, because everybody's got a step to take. But, I'm boycotting Target right now because I kind of just got to draw a line at Satan. I mean, when you've got products that kind of are crossing over that particular line, that's my line. And maybe the point of that is everybody has a line. Everybody's got a statement. But I think we have to really go back to the concept of, as worship leaders, workers of the church, being responsible for that environment. It might be time for us to write our own songs. I'm always going to say that. If you're, bummed out that you can't use these songs over here or whatever, write your own songs for your own congregations. Put checks and balances in it. Is it a good song? Is the tool of that song, and I don't mean to be degrading to it, but is it perfectly fit with the message that you've already vetted out? I think that that's what it comes back to, is those checks and balances that happen way before. Spiritual abusive environments, whether they're personal, church, business, whatever they are. It's such a hot topic right now. I mean, I've lived with this for so many years. Back when I babysat Moses, this was still going on. So it's not a big new hot topic. Ooh, this is super, salacious now. No, this situation's been for a very, very long time. Who are the people that are sniffing out the stuff that you just kind of go, probably not right. This is a red flag. Who are the people holding people accountable? We're looking at like Mars Hill, we're looking at Hillsong, we're looking at all these places that have had a history of people turning their backs, had a history of protecting the culture because they're afraid they're going to lose numbers, protecting the culture more than really being accountable for what we're supposed to be doing. And so I guess my comment overall is, God used a donkey. And so maybe in many ways throughout the course of the years before this even came about, I would like to believe that God's work is still done. His word does not return void. All of those good and wonderful people who accidentally heard those songs or accidentally were caught up in that, I'd like to believe if they have scripture, God's good in his word, and he says his word does not return void. I would like to believe that the people, all of us are accountable to God. Even if we get caught up in the big school of fish that ends up going downhill, we all have our relationships with the Lord. And I think the biggest, once again, as always, the biggest spotlight is actually on the accountability. And it starts with us. It starts with us understanding. I mean, do research. If there's a clean song that Hillsong did, then maybe you'd want to do that one song and that becomes a thing. And if there's not, then maybe you don't do it. Whatever it is, we are all in our walk. But we have the responsibility to at least, blow the horn, ring the bell, do what we need to do to draw attention to the things that are harmful.
All right. Rich.
Well, do you guys like the song "Oh Holy Night"?
Mm-hmm. I already love where this is going, but yes,
it's written by an atheist. There's a term that Catholics use in church history would use called Christi Capitis. And it basically means that in the person of Christ as the head, when you administer sacrament, so the priest could just, who knows what that priest is like. It didn't matter. It was under the head of Christ being the head of the church. Therefore, when you're administering the sacraments. And so I think the concept there is that, do I have to get rebaptized? So the Catholics would ask this because the priest was just bonkers or the Pope was bonkers. No, that doesn't matter. Christ is the head of the church. Big C, little c. Doesn't matter. So I think sometimes we look at that. There's always been throughout our history dealing with stuff. But what we as the evangelical church has a 10-year when it comes to systems. We do not take corporate sin seriously. We do not. Yeah, we'll boycott Disney or Target or whatever, all these different things. But we will not look within our own systems because it challenges our power. Look at the Southern Baptists, a denomination with millions of people who for decades allowed abuse to happen in their church. And we're not just talking about music here. Yeah. We're talking about systems and music and, like their publishing's gone. I guess Lifeway doesn't exist anymore for various reasons. But there's a lot to say about that. And the fact of it is worship music, there's only 3 record labels, I think, right now. And almost all the worship music you guys and we all do is funneled through gatekeepers who do the same thing as gangster rap. And so the systems go deeper if we want to unpack and peel the onion away. And so some of the people making decisions are making it what will sell because it's business. And so we have to be smart and look at that fact of what we curate is a funny word, but what we curate as far as content for our churches. Do we want the boardrooms of Sony to decide it? Or do we want a pastoral shepherding kind of mindset on our history and our theology and our life to filter what we do in our church? And we've allowed ourselves to be systematized because it's easy to scale when you have all this stuff available to you. And it's good. Hillsong's music is good. Some of the stuff, and it works. Even if you don't like it, it works. And that's what good is to a lot of people. So we are going against things that are easy to buy, easy to get, easy to find. The data, they have the data on us. They know what the local church needs and they sell it to us and we buy it. A lot of people make a lot of money on that. So the question is, are we willing to be questioning our own systems, not just the systems that we're submitting to, but are we willing to look at our own selves? Accountability is a big thing, but we look at it as personal. It's beyond personal. We need to see corporate, like the Southern Baptist Church can't keep themselves accountable. And they're trying and they're doing as best they can, I think. A lot of people in there were working very hard for many years. You can't say everybody in the group is let's not associate with them now and cancel the whole group of people based upon even the system that they're in. Just like the song "Oh Holy Night," was written. I know people. I'm not going to do "Come Thou Fount" because the guy ended up a Universalist. So Rich, you can't do that hymn. I remember that when I was young. I was like, I didn't know. I just love the song, and I don't know that many hymns. But anyway, so we have this problem. Two issues. One, the systems that we own, we don't question. So we don't have a language or vocabulary to question the systems of abuse, systems of business, system of things that we should just be smart about. Doesn't mean we don't use the things that we have around us, but we don't really have that mindset when it comes to pastors. Don't have it. They're not trained in that. They're trained to preach. They're not, just to be honest, they're not good at collaboration because they're good at getting their sermon done and then they're good at telling you what to do and living their vision up, but they don't even know how to collaborate. They just know. So they have a hard time with this idea of systems, yet they're in a bubble that is a system. And I think those of us who are artists, we understand system. We can't get anything done without our friends, without colleagues, without anything. And so we have to question our own systems. How am I operating? So, yeah, so the idea that the Catholics had that, hey, if this priest is, a bad one, that doesn't mean your baptism isn't authentic. If this song was written by somebody who turns out bad, doesn't mean that God's not going to use that song. And I don't know who it was said. Someone says there's no Christian music, just Christian musicians. There's no Christian building. There's people who are Christians that fill the building. Lyrics. Yeah. Well, the Christian lyrics. Well, yeah. "Oh Holy Night's" Christian lyrics. So the guy didn't write as Christian. So all this to say is we need to think of systems, learn about that language, try to understand it. That has a lot to do with history. Has a lot to do with that. And then we also understand: are we going to cancel everything? Because we can either criticize or we can create. And I love the idea of writing and challenging the system by not just canceling. Don't cancel Hillsong. Write better songs and demand to your pastor. Let's sing those songs. The pastor, I know everybody's asking for this one song. We've done "Shout to the Lord" a lot. It's a great song. But this person in our church just wrote this song. Can we workshop it? Can we try it in our small groups? Can we do something to get it out there? Whatever it takes, that's the kind of counseling or not counseling, but protest I think we need in the church. So as far as art and songs, but the other thing I'm talking about too is when it comes to abusive systems, we are just beginning now to understand in our bubble of faith that's not worldwide because it's understood better worldwide actually, what it is that's infected us. From slavery, by the way, from the Civil War, from things that have not been resolved, from sins that we have not confessed. It's easier to say, I'm going to protest against this than it is, why are we going to listen to everything Jonathan Edwards said when he basically wrote sermons on the back of slavery seats that he bought? It was able to, basically found sermons that, this is a couple of the slaves that he bought. It was on the back of one of his sermons. He saved paper, this kind of stuff exists. We have to it would exhaust us to cancel and try to look at every single thing. But at the same time, we have to learn to look at the injustices. We need to learn to look at our own part in it. And we need to look at what a redemptive life looks like, especially as artists. What we're going to create, what we're going to write, and in response to this. I would love to see songs come out of abuse that are going to honestly tell people what that experience is and how God is in there. That would be powerful. That would be a way for me to try to express that. And it's hard because we have a lot of gatekeepers who just want to go there. We have certain emotions. We got to be happy, clappy at church a lot of times, to be honest. But are we willing to be honest with the human condition? And who we are as people? We're not perfect. And one last thing I would say, the Bible, senior year of my son's high school, senior year, we read through the whole Bible with the Apple TV, read it to us, and we talked about it. It was a great experience, once in a lifetime. And one of the conclusions he said, "Hey, Dad, the Bible's really honest about people, isn't it? It's the most honest thing about humanity. And the story is how God is so good in spite of that." So I think we just have to reframe systems And then what's our response as creative people to it? How do we actually make a change?
So are we canceling the culture, or are we canceling what it represents? Are we canceling what we associate it to, and we no longer want to be aligned with that? For instance, R. Kelly. Okay. Great music at the beginning, right? Until you found out exactly what he did. Are you going to still listen to that music? You can't cancel rap music. You can't cancel others who music resembles R. Kelly, but where do you define the line in the church to say this is too close to home, or it's okay as long as we don't do it?
Here's why I don't like the word cancel. I mean, and this is a different argument than cancel, the issue of cancel culture, which, of course, is a big deal right now. But the reason I don't like the word cancel is because it implies an end over irredeemable. And that's why in my mind, and we talked about this last week, like, I'm not ready to cancel Carl Lentz. I'm ready to put him on hold and see him do the work of repentance and redeeming and all that. But I don't want to cancel him. I know for a fact God hasn't canceled him or Brian Houston or me. I know God hasn't canceled any of us. And so I don't like the word cancel for that reason, because it just implies that they're finished and there's nothing redeemable. R. Kelly has every potential of meeting Jesus in his cell and becoming a greater person of faith than I've ever been. So I don't want to cancel him in that way. So I have to ask, like, when is Carl okay? Like, what is our benchmark for knowing Carl's okay from our perspective? Because we're willing to cancel him without being close to the situation. From our same vantage point, when is he then okay? When is Brian okay and redeemed in our eyes? And I just think those are valid questions for us. Like Sharia, I'm not big on boycotting, but I boycott a few things. I try to avoid chocolate and coffee that's slave traded and things like that. And I try to be careful, but man, none of us can keep tabs on all of that. I don't know when I choose my cell phone company, if that bill is going to fund other things that the company supports that I don't know about. I mean, how do we keep track of all that? And so we just do the best and that's why best with what we've got. And that's why, Brandon, I wouldn't try to talk you out of, you need to make those decisions based on where you are. But I do ask those kind of questions of myself a lot. If we're going to look at what's one of the most abusive, horrible, sinful tools out there now, it's the computer. Mm. And look at us all using the computer right now to spread the gospel. And so if we were to use some of those same guidelines, none of us would touch a computer because it's sinful, abusive. It's all these things, or it can be. And so, I like, Rich, I like your whole perspective on that there are so many bigger systems in place. Like, we can only do our micro bit in here, but as a whole, that we have to look at this corporate structure we have. And there are a lot that goes back to what I first said, like, our church as a whole is a broken system. And we just muddle through the best we can in that and try to keep our eyes on Jesus.
That's refreshing to hear. But what happens is those in power of those systems, they probably know this too, but we don't share that with our flock. We don't say, hey, you know what? I'm not perfect. The system isn't perfect. We have things in our history we're embarrassed about, like every family has. And what we're trying to do is to move forward with Christ as our example.
Well, and I always wonder about that in general too. Like, I've heard 100 pastors, as you have too, stand on the platform and say, I am the most sinful person in here, right? But they don't stand up there and tell us all their sins from that week either. The face is still very phony in that sense. And And I often wonder, like, what if we were in a church where every sin was exposed, including from the pastor, one, who would be qualified to get up there on the platform and speak? It's just interesting, like how far, you said peel back the layers of the onion. I mean, that's what it is. Like this is a never ending onion, unfortunately.
But there has to be a declaration that says that this behavior is not okay. This behavior is not what we accept as a church. And so when I say that I'm boycotting it for myself, that's what I'm saying. I'm trying to tout the message that what's happening is not okay. It's not you're going to go to hell because you do Hillsong music. It's what's represented. And for those who had been abused and damaged by the church, they would take that just as seriously, as opposed to those who have not suffered any kind of abuse by the church, probably wouldn't think a thing about it. But I say that, we have to stand for something, or otherwise we don't stand for anything.
So I just, I'm listening, man, this is such a good conversation about all different opinions. I just love it. I love everything that everybody's bringing. And I just want to throw my 2 cents and say, what a privilege and entitled position we get to be in by discussing something that is so literally, and I'm going to say this carefully, cautiously, and in love, shallow compared to the real battle that is out there for people's souls. Rich said something about we're happy, clappy, and everything. Guess what? Our culture is going to just culturalize ourselves right out of that happy, clappy. Pretty soon, we're going to have to be pretty honest, because we're not going to be able to keep up this facade. It's just the culture's moving fast in that direction. And are we deeply tethered? Instead of canceling, going back, I'd like to encourage everybody, raise the standard and meet it. Instead of going back down into this pit where we see all that stuff, that stuff's in the Bible. That stuff's so ancient. All this stuff is so ancient. People, taking stuff and doing stuff. I was telling a friend of mine earlier today, I go, when were the days of Ananias and Sapphira, where the big cheaters, and they just
we'll
died.
all be dead.
Right. They just died. And I love the fact that the scripture goes, and everyone was terrified. Yeah. Guess what? Yeah. Everybody's terrified after that. We have to understand, let's not like tick too far in the compass this way. Our goal is for souls. Our goal is to understand there's a battle for those souls inside of our place that we're at right now. Our goal is to try to influence as much as possible with what Rich said about systems and everything. Understand, give people a chance for redemption for that, because that's what we get to do in Christ. But we also need to say, hey, wait a second. No, I'm not going to do that. Nope, I'm not going to go behind this closed door with you, sir. No, I'm not going to do that. Nope, I'm not going to see that little shenanigan going on in the finances, or see that shenanigan going on with that young girl and that older guy, or whatever it is. Whatever is an everyday situation, we have the opportunity to stand up for that. But instead of going back, and I'm with Tony, I'm not a big fan of the word cancel. I'm not. Part of the reason is our culture just uses it so much, and I just want to be creative and do something different. I don't want to fall into that same stuff where we're like, oh, let's follow culture and we're doing I'm just not into it. So I'm going to push myself, at least that's the only thing that I know to do, is to raise a standard, to raise a certain please and thank you culture, a culture that keeps people accountable in a loving way, a culture that is able to pray for one another, really what God calls us to do. We raise our standard, and we are unwilling to move off of that. I have a friend of mine who's in leadership, and he wants me to be sarcastic with him. Always just be sarcastic. That's my love language. Sarcastic. I won't do it. That's a line I ain't going to cross. I know, Tony, that's your love language too, but I won't cross that. Not in a business situation, not in anything that's professional, because for me, that's my own standard of raising something where I'm treating everyone as best as I can with respect. That's a dumb little thing. It's like a little thing, but that's how these things start, in just making sure now our eyes are open. Thank you, Hillsong. I'm grateful. I'm grateful for Mars Hill. I'm grateful for all these things. You've opened our eyes to something. Thank you very much for doing that. And just continue to remember the real battle that's out there. It has nothing to do with songs, has nothing to do with any of this. It has to do with the real work of encouraging people and of looking at the true power of who Jesus is and making sure we have an answer if someone has a question.
Now I'm going to struggle to not be extra sarcastic with you for the next few weeks.
So
I was just going to say one thing, and that is we need to learn to grieve the stuff that we've found out and see corporately and personally. We are human beings, whole people. And that's part of our problem too, is that's a language our culture doesn't know.
Right. Final words, Tony?
No, I mean, not necessarily. I think that everything that's been said has just been really great. I agree. This is a great conversation about a really difficult and important thing. And
Indeed.
There's lots to think about. And, from our end of it, there isn't necessarily a right or wrong. Should we or shouldn't we use Hillsong music? You follow where God is leading you, but ask all the questions. Ask all the questions and say all the prayers,
Yes, I think I agree. And to be equally if we want to raise the standard, as you said, Sharia, we have to equally know what that standard is and know how, and that means looking within ourselves and to identify what is acceptable, what is not. But that needs to be just as equal as the redemptive side, is what you say, Tony, because we're all in need of redemption. And yes, there's worse people than us, and none of us should be canceled. I totally agree with that. And so that you're right to say the question, when? When do we receive them back? So agreed. This is a very tough conversation, but absolutely, we're doing it in a very connected way because there is so much slant out there. And even I know I can get a little bit too slanted, but when we can bring into focus and have a healthy conversation, the whole idea is to bring awareness to raise the standard. So each of you done that today. 30 seconds. Thanks so much, everybody. You've been great. And Tony will always be the timekeeper. I appreciate that. And it's a pleasure, though. You guys are great. Tony, Sharia, Rich, thanks for joining us today as always. And we'll be back with more episodes and more topics coming up soon. So
if we don't get canceled.
Cancel Worship Team Training Podcast right now. If you disagree, that's okay. All right, guys. Thanks again for joining us. And we'll see you back here next time soon. Bye.
Bye.